We have just learned who will be hosting the 2030 World Cup, and it is Spain, and Portugal, and Morocco, and Uruguay, and Paraguay, and Argentina. 6 countries are going to be hosting the World Cup over 3 different continents. It is going to be an interesting tournament. So it should be said that the South American teams will not be hosting matches throughout the World Cup, just the opening games. And I do like how they're returning to Uruguay for the opener. I mean, it's really cool that they're celebrating Uruguay in the centennial anniversary. Uruguay hosted the first World Cup. I'm not quite sure why Argentina and Paraguay are there. Well, I mean, I know why, but I don't get the rationale behind them being there. And saying the World Cup is going to be over 3 continents is a bit of an exaggeration. I mean, I guess it is technically, but the South American nations are going to be out of it by the first 3 games. And then Morocco, Spain, and Portugal are pretty close together, especially when you compare it to, like, the United States. Like, getting from Morocco to Spain is like getting from Delaware to New Jersey. It's not that much of a travel commitment. All 6 of the host nations have already qualified for the World Cup, but with it being 48 teams, I don't think any of them would have really struggled. Maybe Paraguay. Have to see how many teams get in from South America. But it is a little bit disappointing that an 1/8 of the World Cup has already been set in stone. I mean, it hurts qualifying a little bit, but I think that's already hurt by expanding the World Cup to 48 teams in general. And while we're on negatives, it should be said that a couple of these host nations are a bit questionable. I'm going to be starting out with Morocco. They finally get to host the World Cup after bidding for a ton of times and honestly being kind of screwed over by FIFA and the bribery scandal in 2010. But I don't feel too bad for them considering, well, just Google Morocco human rights violations. And it reminds me of the quote I heard from a FIFA executive, which goes something along the lines of, "Less democracy makes things easier for the World Cup." Yeah, that's interesting. In addition, I'm not sure it's wise for Argentina to be hosting a game right now. Thankfully, it is only one, but it does kind of remind me of Brazil in 2014 with all the protests that people in their nation were going off of when they were focusing on a soccer tournament instead of actually helping their people. I think that's something that should be considered. Hopefully, since it's only one game, they should be fine and not have to put too much money into it, though. Also, it's notable that Ukraine is not a host nation. Now, this is understandable as they are still at war, and for being completely honest, there's a decent chance that they're still going to be at war in 2030. It's a really sad situation there. But I bring this up because, well, there are multiple nations only hosting one game, and I don't think it would be impossible to reschedule Ukraine thing. So while I get the explanation, part of me has to remember how FIFA allowed Russia to host a World Cup, and maybe they're still doing a favor for the motherland or something like that. On the bright side, Spain and Portugal look like good hosts for the tournament. They have stadium infrastructure already in place, and they have good football culture as well. Everything you'd like to see when you're hosting a World Cup. Now, I'm bringing up other nations. Like, I should note that Spain and Portugal aren't perfect by any means, but to be focusing on their problems when we have actual repressive, undemocratic regimes hosting the World Cup, I don't think that's productive. Another positive is having Uruguay open the World Cup. It's cool to see FIFA returning to its roots with the original host and the original winners of the first World Cup over 100 years ago, and it's fun to see FIFA celebrating its past and taking a look back at what made it special before it allows Saudi Arabia to buy. I mean, it gives Saudi Arabia the 2034 World Cup. Overall, I think it's pretty good to see Spain and Portugal hosting the World Cup, and it's going to be fun to see Uruguay open up the tournament, but having Morocco be a part of this, that's just returning back to the human rights violations that FIFA is just known for at this point. I mean, I'll say the quote again, "Less democracy makes for an easier World Cup." That's really disappointing. I don't see the point of having Paraguay and Argentina involved in the tournament as well, and it is a little bit disappointing to see, but hopefully most of the games will be played in Spain and Portugal. Maybe Morocco can help turn things around in their country by then. But, I mean, FIFA hasn't changed. I mean, that's obvious. It'll be obvious when Saudi Arabia hosts the 2034 World Cup. And, yeah, that's all I got to talk about. See ya.